Hello, and welcome back to Team Talk on the Bottom Bins podcast. This is our second episode, hosted by myself, Richie, where I speak to fans of clubs directly and we try and get some insight on the football club that they support. Glad today to be joined by one of my best friends and our resident voice of his disdain at some of our opinions on Everton, Conall. Conall, how's things?
I can't complain. All smiles on my end.
Happy days, glad to hear it. Listen, I've been trying to get you onto this for a while and finally glad to get it sorted. So look, first things first, I would just want to talk to you about the current situation of Everton at the minute. Obviously just come off a fantastic result at the weekend against Arsenal. Dyche ball back and in full effect at Goodison. But on an overall sort of this season, Connell, it hasn't been plain sailing for Everton this season, and probably hasn't been plain sailing for probably the last 24 months now. So, as a fan, then, how has it been to support Everton over these last couple of years?
I genuinely don't think that it could have been much worse. The only way that it could have been worse would have been relegation last season. And up until that win last week, I thought relegation this season was absolutely guaranteed. It was abysmal. It's hard to choose between Lampard's team this year and Benitez's team last year for the worst Everton teams I've seen.
Yeah, and to be honest, watching Everton, me and you would go on and watch Everton games quite a bit, especially like when Everton play United. We do tend to watch it together, but this last wee while, I haven't seen Everton as poor in a long time. But are you cautiously maybe optimistic now that because Dyche has come in that you will probably avoid the drop now?
I think that the important thing was that we got Dyche before Southampton or Leeds or maybe West Ham were able to get Sean Dyche in. Um, Optimistic, I think, would be a stretch. I think if Dyche had have been appointed maybe 3 or 4 weeks earlier, I think then, yeah, at the minute it's still very touch and go. They were saying it's like 17 cup finals. That's what the rest of the season is. Every game is a cup final for us.
Yeah, every game will matter from now, especially considering just how tight those teams are around the bottom of the league. But look, obviously there has been a lot of controversy surrounding Everton this season, and it has come to light sort of in recent weeks. I know obviously you're a massive Everton fan, you know all about the protests, and they have been going on for quite a while now. But to what extent now do you think the fan base is just fed up with the ownership? And for those who maybe don't know what's going on at Everton, could you just give us a wee bit of an insight into what it is exactly that the Everton fans are protesting against?
It's we are the worst run club out of the top divisions anywhere in Europe, and I don't think it's very close. We have a board with our owner who, to be fair, has come in and has spent his money, but it isn't a man who he doesn't know football. He doesn't have football experience. He's a businessman. He's an accountant. So he's come in and made footballing decisions. A chairman who, let's be honest, should have left the club maybe 10 years ago, Bill Kenwright.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, you have club legends Graham Sharp sitting on their hands on the board doing nothing. You got a CEO in Denise Baxendale who honestly nobody knows what she does. Like nobody knows at the club what her role is because nothing she does has ever been any sort of positive spin for the club.
And look, I know it is maybe a bit hard to then have that sort of performance in the boardroom then reflected on the pitch, but could you see it within the players maybe this season? Could you see that sort of bad blood and that distaste maybe spilling out onto the football field this year?
The players absolutely. I have no reason to believe that they didn't throw the toys out of the pram and give up Frank Lampard. And to be fair, it wasn't working. It wasn't going to work. But you could see on the pitch that players wanted change. Players don't want to be here. The scenes when you've got Anthony Gordon and Yerry Mina being blocked in by their cars, fans giving them abuse. Um, you could see exactly what the club had become, and it had become so toxic. That's the only way to describe it. Toxic. The atmosphere around Goodison is vile. The atmosphere on social media vile. There's no there was no light at the end of the tunnel. And when you were facing possible relegation, relegation in our position is not just relegation. Relegation, our position is liquidation. The club wouldn't survive without Premier League money in its current state.
Yeah, and that insight is totally correct, Conall. Totally correct. And look, realistically, I have to ask you this, because it was talked about so much on social media when the videos emerged of fans, sort of crowding around players' cars, and look, obviously we're fans from the north of Ireland here, so we do maybe only get over to see our sides, two, three, maybe four times a year if we're lucky. But look, I know you're not there obviously every week, but how did you perceive that sort of behavior from the fans? Did you think that was acceptable, or were you sort of in the line of, look, maybe that was a step too far?
I think that a lot of it was blown out of proportion by the media. I think the likes of the Anthony Gordon incident, it was a crowd of, 14, 15 year olds, maybe 10 of them, surrounding his car. And, you can absolutely understand why the fans are upset watching your players who are on hundreds, thousands of pounds a week driving away in their Porsches and their Range Rovers after getting battered at home by Brighton 4-1. That it had completely boiled over, and it wasn't just the incident wasn't just about the players; it was about the whole club, and the whole club has been in a steady decline since Ronald Koeman was in charge.
Yeah, and that is something you always talk to me about. Anytime we're in the pub or we're just meeting up and we're talking about football, you always say that's where sort of the trouble started, when he was given that much money to spend, and ultimately now it has left you hindered in the transfer market. And coming on to the transfer market, then, Conall, look, obviously January spent no money. Got Sean Dyche in through the door, but no money was spent. Does that worry you, considering the other teams around you all spent in January?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that you always want to bring somebody new in. You don't want to go through a transfer window, especially in the position that we were in, without making any sort of signings. I mean, we had one signing that was a done deal, and he had finished his medical and had taken photos and met with our players, and then suddenly he wound up at Tottenham. So
Yeah,
the,
it's a bit annoying that one.
the club did say, and Dyche said it in his first interview, there were funds there, but he also made it very clear that he does not buy a player for the sake of buying a player. He will buy a player if it's better than what he has at the minute.
Yeah, and I think that's a there is absolutely nothing wrong with a manager having that kind of philosophy. To be honest, makes sense. Um, Look, written in the stars really that Dwight McNeil would assist James Tarkowski for the goal at the weekend, a goal made in Burnley. Again, look, does it instill that wee bit of hope in you that there are players there that have worked under Deitch? They understand exactly the type of work that they're going to have to put in here. Some of the Everton players have the experience of relegation battles on their hands. So does it give you a bit of hope then that, look, our guys have been in the mud before, they've been warring in the trenches, they can get through this?
I think, and a lot of people might disagree, we're not the worst squad in the Premier League. We're not one of the three worst squads in the Premier League. Like,
Well, I
there
don't
are
think you'd have.
players there. James Tarkowski and Connor Cody is a very solid duo at the back.
Agreed. Agreed.
Amadou Onana in the middle of the park has been an absolute revelation. And when you play to his strengths, as we saw against Arsenal, he didn't score, but it was his best performance since Carlo Ancelotti left. Dominic Calvert-Lewin will score you goals if he is given the right service. So I think there is definitely optimism there. I think the players that he has are players who will run themselves into the ground for him. There was a stat in Sky Sports on it was talking about the most distance covered by an Everton player this season,
Yep.
and 80% of those distances were covered in that Arsenal game. And it just shows you the
Yeah.
difference in work rate. Like Dwight McNeil never stops running, and I have been his harshest critic since he's come to the club. I didn't think he was good enough. I thought we overspent, but something for the Everton fans. Will always support a player. You don't have to be technically the best, but you'll always support a player who tries. You know, you've got
And
the likes of Stephen Naismith, absolute cult hero.
yeah,
Wasn't by any means the greatest footballer, but Stephen Naismith tried. Or the famous one from when I was younger, Dennis Stracquil.
yeah.
Dennis Stracquil had no footballing ability, but he would run himself into the ground for 90 minutes, and the Everton fans still love him.
Exactly, exactly. And look, speaking about like the Everton fans and as a whole, Conall, obviously you've experienced Goodison. Always talked about as one of the best atmospheres in the Premier League. Always, anytime media or anytime fans are just talking about English football in general, Goodison is always one of the fortresses of English football that people talk about. Obviously, you aren't going to be in Goodison for much longer. But what's your take on that? Are you afraid of maybe losing that sort of atmosphere when you move to a new stadium, or do you think, look, it's natural progression for the club? It's about time that they kept up with these new facilities as such.
Well, ultimately, you've hit the nail on the head there. You have to expand and build new to make money to compete because that's what football is now. Football is a money game, and for the likes of financial fair play, you need to increase the club's revenue. Got to have a bigger stadium, and you just cut and expand Goodison or renovate Goodison. And you will obviously miss it. It's a very historic ground. Great memories, great events. But the team who they brought in to build the new stadium and his work with the club, I think the atmosphere will transfer over very well. It's going to be an unbelievably tight pitch, the way that Goodison was. Fans are going to be right on top of it. You know, an extra 10,000 Evertonians screaming at you for 90 minutes. I think the new stadium is going to be absolutely fantastic on the basis that we're still in the Premier League.
Well, look, I mean, I to be honest, like when we did our mid-season reviews there, I had no qualms about Everton. Like I do think they are going to stay in the Premier League. To be honest, I know obviously you're a supporter, you watch them every week, you know more than I do about the club, but I just, as a football institution, like Everton are a massive, massive club, and they're the only club to boast the stat that they have never been relegated from the top division. And look, you talked a wee bit there, Conall, about Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who I do think is a talented striker. And definitely, when he come off the other day, Everton did sort of lose a gear up top. But you were very adamant with me over the last few years that you would cash in on him if you got a good price. But listen, different situation now for Everton. How important is he going to be to keeping Everton in the Premier League?
Absolutely vital. Just to go back on your point about looking to cash in, I was always under the impression that we would lose one of Richarlison or Dominic Calvert-Lewin.
Hmm.
Ultimately, at the time, and I would probably still say it now, I would have rather lost Calvert-Lewin than Richarlison. I think I'd rather have Richarlison there now. But he's going to be massive because there's no other options up top. Neil Mopé, as much as I like him because he just comes on the bench and winds people up, Neil
Yeah,
Mopé is not going to score 5 goals between now and the end of the season.
yeah.
And our only other option is Ellis Sims, who had a decent enough loan spell at Sunderland, but is completely unproven at the Premier League level. So keeping Calvert-Lewin fit and playing to a system that suits him, Lampard really did not suit Calvert-Lewin at all. Like when he was at his absolute best under Ancelotti, Dominic Calvert-Lewin didn't leave the 18-yard box.
Yeah.
He's a poacher. That's what he is. He does not leave the 18-yard box, and I think Dyche is going to have something very similar for him. He's phenomenal in the air, and Dyche is crosses. Low hard drives, balls over the top. That's what he can feed off.
And just speaking about the previous manager, then Connell, obviously, I would have always we would have always joked about with one another, especially when United were doing bad and when Everton were doing bad, we'd give each other a good bit of stick. But look, I never thought Lampard was really the right man for Everton. Don't get me wrong, he did an amazing job keeping Everton up last year. He really, really did. But he tried to sort of change that style of football then when he come in this year. Um, realistically, what is the best? What's the best football you think Everton play? Because Lampard was very much Lampard had sort of gone to a different direction, was really looking to try and sort of play out from the back and all. And then, you watch Everton against Arsenal and it's long kicks up the pitch from the goalkeeper, using their physicality and their presence in midfield to win the ball. Do, do you think that this is the best progression now for? So yes, then ultimately, Conall, what is the best way for Everton to play football in your opinion?
Based on the team that we have now, I enjoyed the game against Arsenal more than I've enjoyed any game that we've played since Carlo Ancelotti left. I think
Yeah.
ultimately it you just have to play, and I think the criticisms, especially from what I was reading on Twitter from a lot of Arsenal fans, there's a lot of unwarranted criticism about the way that we played because we didn't
Hmm.
hold on to the ball. We had 30% possession and had more shots on target.
Yeah.
I much prefer. I don't want to watch us pass the ball around the back for 20 minutes. I want to watch us get the ball and go direct up the pitch and stick the ball in the back of the net. That's what
Well,
I want to
exactly.
see, and I think either you have a perfect midfield for it now with, Amadou Onana, Abdoulaye Toure, who looked like a man reborn at the weekend. You've got Alex
Yeah.
Iwobi and Idrissa Gueye, and I think that that is a perfect group to play that kind of football.
Exactly. And look, people can criticize all they want, Conall. Like at the end of the day, football's a results business, and Everton took the 3 points, and Arsenal didn't. It's as simple as that. A question that I'm going to be asking everybody on this series, and Conall, is what's a realistic ambition for Everton in 5 years' time? Where do you see the club all being well, and Dyche, gets to spend a bit of money, maybe things get sorted out in the boardroom. What's the best possible scenario for Everton? Do you think for 5 years' time?
The best possible scenario, seventh, a comfortable seventh, knocking on the door of the Europa League, something similar to where West Ham were last season. Because it
Hmm.
doesn't take, an age to rebuild in football. If you hold on to the good things that you have now, two or three signings, you're right up the table. Like the table is so packed at the moment. You're 6 points from the top half.
Yeah.
It's honestly, it is just a lottery of who do you bring in. I think we'll have the extra money with the new stadium. I'd like to think that that is a bigger draw to players as well. You want to come play in a
Definitely.
nice fancy new stadium. I think ultimately you want to be knocking on the door and challenging for cups.
Yeah, completely
If
agreed.
if you
Completely
offered
agreed.
me,
Everton.
a year of Europa League football or a League Cup or an FA Cup, but you have to finish 10th, I'm taking the cup every time.
Yeah, look, trophies is what everybody's fighting for ultimately. Don't get me wrong, yes, I understand what you're saying. Like yes, getting into Europe's important and all, but look, winning trophies, filling the trophy cabinets is much more important. Um look, just on the topic of transfers then obviously, look, I know Everton are a wee bit hindered at the minute. Because of the likes of FFP and stuff, and trying to get players out the door so that they can make more signings. But in terms of sort of realistic signings then for the summer, Connell, where do you think Everton need to address, and what sort of players do you think Everton need to be looking at then come the summertime?
Uh, it's mostly on the attack. I think a winger and a number nine are absolutely vital. I would like another fullback. We're still trotting Seamus Coleman out there, 36 years
Uh-huh.
of age, and to be fair, it's no disrespect to Seamus. He's been a phenomenal player, but he's 36. He shouldn't be starting in the Premier League. And Patterson's been very good when he's played, but that's the big thing. It's when he's played, and he's just not been
Yeah.
available enough. So we need to bring somebody in there. Um, there's a lot of talk about Jordan Pickford leaving to go to Tottenham, maybe. I think for the right price, I would let that happen.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing, and it's not making a signing, the biggest thing for us will be holding on to Amadou Onana.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Definitely, because there's going to be clubs interested in him in the summer. Although, look, in all seriousness, Connell, if a club did come in with, say, 50, 60 million for the likes of Onana, do you think that could be, would you be happy enough to let him go for that price because then that money could be reinvested? Or do you feel like, look, Onana has to stay at Everton no matter what?
For 60 million, there would be no chance. What I base that on, we just sold Anthony Gordon for 45.
Hmm.
I wouldn't let Amadou Onana leave Everton for anything less than 80 million at the minute.
Wow,
He's
wow.
he's 20 years of
Um,
age. He plays for his national team, and ultimately
mhm.
now it's not a buyer's market; it's a seller's market. What
Yeah, that's
what
true.
we ask for
That's true.
is what you'll pay for, and with clubs, you look at Newcastle now, and just all the clubs around. There's money in the Premier League to be thrown, and I think that's when you have to start charging.
Yeah, no, definitely, especially if you are selling to other clubs in the Premier League. Agreed, lad. Agreed. Again, another question I'm asking everybody in this series: Who is your favorite ever player to have played for
Tim
Everton?
Cahill, 100%. Blue Kangaroo.
The Blue Kangaroo. And what was it about Tim Cahill then that, has maybe made him stand out above? Because at the end of the day, like you've seen some very talented players come through the door, like the likes of James Rodriguez was absolutely phenomenal at Everton. But what even Mikel Arteta, Fellaini, I know Fellaini's maybe not the sexiest of
Absolutely
names, but
loved Marouane Fellaini. I would never disrespect the man.
yeah, did an absolute job for both of our clubs. So what is it that puts Tim Cahill on a pedestal above players like that there?
There was something. It was just. I don't know if it's the way that the club was at that time. We were in Europe every year. A couple of good cup runs, but there was just something about Tim Cahill, who when you needed him, he would step up and he would drag the team. And obviously, he was not as good of a footballer as a Mikel Arteta or a Leighton Baines or a Stephen Pienaar, but he would fight with everything he had for the badge. Like he was, I've never seen a man who can head a ball that well ever for a man who was 5'10",
Very,
and he was the most
yeah.
dominant player in the air I think I've ever seen. He was outstanding.
He was. Tim Cahill was a very, very special player, a very, very good footballer. To be fair, probably you'd probably say he's probably Australia's greatest ever export. Like,
Oh
wouldn't he
yeah,
be?
I don't think there's any. I think there's a level that he is above the likes of a Harry Kewell or Mark Viduka. Um, I would give an honourable mention to James Rodriguez, the greatest player that no Everton fan ever saw play live.
I
It
know
feels like a
that's a
fever
shame.
dream when we were sitting second in the league on Boxing Day under Ancelotti with
Under
no fans on
Ancelotti,
the
yeah.
ground. It just doesn't feel
Yeah.
real.
No, like that was a real, real shame to be honest that no Everton fan got to see James
There's only
Rodriguez
one
live.
man to blame for
Very
it:
special. Who?
Rafael Benitez.
Oh, Benitez. I thought you were going to say like Boris Johnson or something for locking us down. I didn't know where you were going with that one.
Based on the
Um,
interview that he gave last week, Benitez essentially came in the preseason training and told James, "You're 30, you're too old, uh, you're not going to be in my team." Told him to find a new club, and then decides to replace James with a 30-year-old Andros Townsend.
uh, typical, really. Benitez was brutal,
Uh,
brutal
I was at
manager. Like,
two away games last year: QPR in the cup and Crystal Palace in the league. And a lot of people say the hatred of Benitez was because he was Liverpool. I don't care that he managed Liverpool. He just played the most putrid, vile football, and
and it's mad though because like Benitez does still have a name in football, but yet you went and seen that football live, and it's as you said, just shocking, really,
it,
wasn't it?
it was with the Crystal Palace game was a lot worse. I give it, losing the QPR and penalties in the first round of the League Cup, but the Crystal Palace game to get battered all over the pitch by Palace. We made Conor Gallagher look like Kevin De Bruyne that night.
Oh no, he was absolutely shocking. Um, Again, just another question I'm asking everybody on the series. When was the first time you ever seen Everton live? And just describe a wee bit of that experience that you had with the first time that you went to Goodison.
I want to say it was 2005, 2006.
Wow,
I
that's
want I want to
that is
say, and
long
it
ago.
was a home game against Wigan. It was a 2-2 draw. I'm almost certain. Um, I remember the weeks. One of my big memories is the weeks leading up before the match. My dad gave me an Everton program and made me
Yeah.
learn all the players' names off the back of it before I went. Um, I just think it's surreal when you're that young and you go in. I don't think I'd never seen a stadium like that, and you think it's only good as some, but when you're going in at six and you see that, and then you see the players coming out onto the pitch, and you're just overwhelmed.
Yeah, you're totally
Um,
overwhelmed.
and
Totally
then
overwhelmed.
meeting the players like after the game in the car park and stuff. I think I still got a photo with Mikel Arteta somewhere in my room. Just surreal.
The your first match day experience is always just something special. There is something I want you to tell the viewers listening at home though, and it's a story that you've told me many's a time. But there's a certain bar in Liverpool um, that your dad, you and your father used to frequent before match days. Do you want to let the viewers at home know about this bar?
A wonderful, wonderful institute that isn't there anymore. I mean, the penny farthing, and a fella came in a trench coat with a load of books inside of it. Do you want to buy Ian Rush's autobiography? Do you want to buy Kenny Dalglish's biography? My dad says no. No, Everton fan. He goes, right, give me 5 minutes. 5 minutes later, comes back, opens up the trench coat. He's got Graham Sharp's autobiography in the pocket. He just went out to the shop and robbed it.
Every time you tell that story, but I that's unreal. Like that's a football memory that you take with you to
That's
the
that
grave.
is that
Like,
is one of the core memories. Right, my core Everton memories is it's the first game. It was the first European game that I went to when we beat Zenit St Petersburg at home. Watching
yeah.
Umar Nias come off the bench against Bournemouth and score the winner. Just core footballing memories.
Oh, unreal, unreal. Um, yes. Next question then, Conall. What is your best memory or your best ever moment as an Everton supporter then?
I don't want to say Palace last year because I don't want the best memory to be us staying up. Um,
Yeah.
I suppose the best moment is it was the same season. It's 2009, so obviously a prime Man United team. You know,
Yeah.
you were in the European Cup final and stuff, and there's talk of the quadruple and beating Man United on penalties in the semi final, and then going into the final against Chelsea. And Louis Saha scored the quickest ever goal in the FA Cup final.
Yeah.
And it's always, as I always say, it's the hope that kills you. And ended
It
up
is.
losing 2-1 that day. But I think just that from scoring after 20 seconds, and I think just in general, the entire season, I suppose season and a half that Roberto Martinez first had when he came, I think, getting 72 points in the league and then the European journey that next year, although it ended very poorly, likes of, beating Wolfsburg 4-0 at Goodison or 4-1 at Goodison.
That was a Wolfsburg that had
Kevin
Kevin
De,
De Bruyne
Kevin
at
De
the time,
Bruyne
wasn't
didn't
it?
get a sniff on the pitch because Gareth Barry had him the whole night.
Gareth Barry, but that's not a good
It was
player, but
just there has been like as awful. There's a quote from the chairman when the fans are protesting, talking about how we've had good times, and nobody wants to say those are the good times. But when you haven't had much to celebrate, those are the good times. Like obviously, the
yeah,
likes of yourself supporting Man United, you've seen them win everything, whereas I've
yeah.
seen us win nothing. So a good time for me is a nice win or a nice trip in Europe or a nice cup run.
Which look again, it is just that difference, especially like with supporters here from the north of Ireland. Like people are very much like Liverpool, Man United, Arsenal, Chelsea. You're starting to see a few Man City jerseys and stuff
Yeah.
crop up, and like I know, like my family, like even Spurs. There's not many Spurs fans out there, but to be fair, Conall, like I do know a right few Everton fans. So I suppose this leads us on perfectly to the next question. Why do you support Everton? What was the main reason that you support Everton?
I think the cardinal rule in football is you support your local team, you support your dad's team. and my dad's team was Everton. And that's it. There was no ifs, buts, or maybes. It was you're as Everton fans say, you're born, not manufactured. And
Yeah.
I was it. I was just born into it. It's all I've ever known, and would not have it any other way.
And I suppose then, like, whenever your dad was growing up, obviously, and even just before you were born, like Everton were a very successful football team, and I think it is something that a lot of fans, especially around our age, Conall, don't really know about because it was before our time, obviously. But if you just want to let the viewers at home know, like how good were Everton then when your dad was
I
supporting
mean,
them?
when he was my age, we won two league titles in 3 years, a European Cup, Winners' Cup, and FA Cup, and a lot of fans, a lot of pundits said had they been given the opportunity, would have won the European Cup. Obviously,
Yeah,
never got the opportunity, so it's all a maybe. But you had the boys in that team, the legends, all starting England internationals. Neville Southall, considered one of the greatest goalkeepers of all time. Graham Sharp just scored for fun. Gary Lineker for a season, another legend of the game. Like the team
yeah.
they were that good. They they're the only team to go in and just dominate that Liverpool team of the 80s.
Yeah, like even like I know I like when you were saying about the cardinal rule there about supporting who your dad supports, like um I suppose it's because my dad was never really big into football as such. It was always like my granddad and my uncles. They were always massive Spurs fans, but um I understand what you're saying about, being born and not manufactured, but like I was just sort of free to choose whoever I wanted to choose, and
Right.
that's why I ended up supporting Man
And you
United.
would
Like,
you would
but
never regret it.
um, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. But like, don't get me wrong, I do look at Oshin sometimes, and like, obviously, like my family are all Spurs, and sometimes you do sit there and you do feel a bit out of the loop at times because they're all so focused on one football club, and like that's the thing. Like, you always go to the games with your dad, and like my dad would never step foot in Old Trafford. Like, he'd tell me to fuck off if I asked him to go to a game. Um, but like honestly, like for those at home even as well, like obviously, like you and your dad do go to Everton at least once a season, if not twice a season. So, um, what has been some of your like favorite memories and just like going to see Everton live? Is there any like one particular goal or like even a memory before the game or after the game or anything that you can think of that you were there live and you think to yourself, I was there, I seen it.
There is a couple. I remember it was the airport on the way home after the Zenit game. Our place was
Yeah.
full of Russians, full of Zenit fans, and this fella coming over to talk to my dad. He was talking to him for about 10 minutes. We ended up, swapping flags and swapping scarves. So I still got the Zenit scarf up there. And I was like
Oh, that's class.
8 years old, I think, at the time. That's a memory that you sort of hold on to. Um, in terms of goals, honestly, if we're talking about my favorite goal that I've ever seen, it's Umar Nias against Bournemouth because we were terrible that season and we signed Nias and he was Russian Premier League Player of the Year. You know,
Yeah.
big money, like 15 million at the time was fairly big money.
Yeah, it was.
And
It
then it
was a lot
turned
of
out
money.
that he wasn't actually very good at football. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it was 1-1, and Umar came off the bench, and the place just erupted. And he scored in the 3-1 win, and the whole place just absolutely went mental.
And in all seriousness, sorry to cut across you, but like so many people in the media, and like because I've never been to Goodison, so I've never experienced it. Like I lived in Liverpool and always wanted to get to a game, but could just never get round to getting to one. But what is like for anyone that's not an Everton supporter and hasn't seen Everton live or been to Goodison, what is the atmosphere actually like? Because it is talked about so much in the media.
Honestly, it does vary. I'm not gonna lie to you and say that it's always on point. The fans are always up for it. Like when they're up for it, they're up for it. You're so close to the pitch, you're practically on it. Like it is.
Yeah.
They talk about a bear pit. It is a bear pit. So I think when it's on, it is on. For a couple of years, it did just it was toxic. There's no other way to describe it. The post sort of Martinez era through the Koeman era, Allardyce, Marco Silva, Benitez. Like there was nothing to get excited about. It was just progressively getting worse.
Yeah.
But against Arsenal, it was right back at it. You saw the scenes last year, with the flares and stuff outside the stadium and the flags. I, the atmosphere can be absolutely deafening. Like the place does shake. I know it's 120 years old, but the place does shake.
Oh, that's that's unreal.
Like,
That is unreal.
I'm honestly I'm gutted that we're leaving. You have to leave, but you don't want to.
Yeah, I know, and it's a special ground. It always has been. I always even just like the look of Goodison. I love the look of like
Yeah,
older sort of football
right in the middle
stadiums. Like,
of right in the middle of a block of houses.
yeah, like there is something special about that. But look, talking about just one of your former managers there, you mentioned Marco Silva's name. Obviously, he's gone to Fulham now, and he's doing a phenomenal job this
Absolutely.
season. Now, the one. The one thing you always said to me, and I'll never forget this because like we were in school, I think when Silva was the manager of Everton, you always said great attacking football, but couldn't like organising a defence. He was a shambles. Are you sort of surprised to see how well he's doing with Fulham this season?
Yeah, obviously, I don't think anyone would have predicted Fulham would be in the position that they're in. I thought Marco Silva was a lot like Martinez was for us. Everything in front of the back four, okay. Back four is just a shambles. Um,
Yeah.
Marco Silva did at times, play very good football at us, and it was nice to watch. And I think he's lucky that he has such a good goal scorer in Alexander Mitrovic, criminally underrated. I think Mitrovic could play for any team outside of the top six. Um,
Hmm.
I think it's going to last? No, I think
You think he will fall
I
off
think
eventually? Yeah.
he started out quite well at us as well, and it all sort of fell apart relatively quickly. So I'll hold out my judgment until maybe next season, but you can't discredit what they've done this year. I think they're a very good shout for a dark horse to win the FA Cup.
Yeah, that's not crazy to say, to be honest. They have been very, very good this season. And now, obviously, look, Burnley and Everton relegation rivals last year. And I remember me, you, and Husty going to watch Burnley and Everton in Mickey's
Don't
last
remind me.
year. Yeah, and what I remember us watching that game. But look, Deitch is now the new man in charge at Everton. Do you think the fan, like realistically, like do you think this it's a long term appointment? Number one, and number two, will the fans get behind him?
I think the fans are already behind him. That was fans' pick. It was very similar to when Lampard came in last year. There was a lot of talk throughout the media. You know, and it comes back to the board. Really, it's the board was so fractured that the owner wanted Marcelo Bielsa, the chairman wanted Ralph Hasenhüttl, and the director of football
Hmm.
wanted Sean Dyche.
Yeah.
And I think all of the fans agreed that we didn't want Bielsa and we didn't want Hasenhüttl. It was you want Sean Dyche. Do you think anyone's going to keep you up? It's Sean Dyche, and I think
Yeah.
everyone is absolutely behind him. I think it couldn't have been a much better 2 games to come into as a manager because there's no expectation. You don't expect that you're going to beat the top of the league Arsenal, and as an Everton fan, you don't expect to get anything at Anfield.
Well, look, that's it. And look, by the time this episode comes out, the derby will have already happened. But how are you feeling about it? Like I said there on this week's bottom bins that I don't think Everton have ever had a better chance to go to Anfield and get something because they are absolutely shocking. Absolutely shocking. And I really do think Everton's going to stick it up to them this weekend. So, like, are you confident or are you sitting there going, it's Anfield, we don't have we don't have a great record there. Maybe this is one that we'll just have to take a loss on, or how are you feeling about it in general?
We were in the car the other day, and my dad said it perfectly. Said this happens every sort of 2 years or so. Liverpool
Yeah.
aren't in great form, and we're right up for it. We think this is going to be when we're going to get result and it never materializes. If you ask me right now, I think this is as good of an opportunity as you're going to get. I would 100% take a draw going into it.
Hmm.
If you offer me 0-0, I'd take it. Um, just need to. The game's going to be won in the midfield, and I
Yeah,
think that that's where we can absolutely get at them.
kill them.
Like
Yeah.
I know, like you got Thiago and boys like are phenomenal players, but when you've got the Kerr and Onana running around them for 90 minutes, kicking lumps out of them, I think that's going to be the difference. And it all depends on how you deal with the front three.
Well, I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's a front three that's not firing at the minute, and it's like you said, Tarkovsky, Cody, they have been solid. Don't get me wrong, I know Everton have shipped goals this season, but like it's really not been down to like individual performances. Tarkovsky and Cody have actually been quite a good pairing together. But look, realistically, and I know you're an Everton fan, you're the blue side of Merseyside, but are you surprised with what's happening to your biggest rivals so far this season?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got to think for 5 years now they've been bar Man City. They have been unstoppable. You know, and going into this year, you want to peg them for first or second favourite for the league title. Um,
Yeah.
it is eerily reminiscent of Klopp's last season at Dortmund, which
Hmm.
did not go very well at all. Although I still think that they are, one or two signings away from being right back up there again. I
Yeah.
think, in a hypothetical, if they got Jude Bellingham in the summer, they're right back up
Uh-huh.
there. So you don't
Yeah.
take it for granted at the minute.
Yeah, no, fair enough, fair enough. And look, I'm asking everybody this question on this series: Are Arsenal going to win the league?
No,
No. Who you taking
I'm
Man City for
taking
it?
bar. We don't know what's going to happen. There's potential talks of point deductions and stuff. I don't think that Arsenal will win the league. I think Man City have a better mentality, which will come through towards the end of the season.
Fair enough, fair enough. And the last question then for you, Conall: If you're chatting to somebody who's only looking to get into football now and they've never watched it before, and they're talking to you about Everton, what is the reason you would give to convince them to support Everton?
It's the People's Club. That's all you need to know. Um,
The
it's the
people.
People's Club. There's a lot of people who support Liverpool or Arsenal or Man United who aren't they're not they don't feel part of it. When you're something that big, you don't feel a part of it. But when you're at Everton, you feel a part of it.
That's fair enough. Fair enough. Well, listen, Conall, thank you so much for jumping on, and thank you for coming on and doing this episode
Absolutely.
with us.
I expect more guest features in the future.
Oh, absolutely. You can be assured of that there. Because again, I always said, like, if any one of my friends knows anything about football, it is you. And I always find having football conversations with you, more than okay. Um, Well, listen, folks, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the second installment of Team Talk. Our regular Premier League coverage will be coming out on Wednesday if you're listening to this on the Monday. We have also had a few other Premier League episodes out, so please go and give them a listen. Please follow us on all of our social media handles: Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. That's at Bottom Bins Pod for all of them. And as always, join us on the Parlay Sports app on the Apple App Store, where you can come in and have football and conversations with us. Once again, Conall, thank you so much for
Cheers.
jumping
Thank
on.
you.
No worries. And as always, folks, keep a bottom bins.